In this last demo, I'm going to show how we can further improve our process by automating tasks through RPAs and IDP. Let's start with the latest scenario that we simulated. We have now definitely streamlined the latter part of this process, that is the case fulfillment part, after we have replatformed that to FSC and added agents to work alongside users and reduce the user's workload. But now we can see that there are still some bottlenecks left in the upstream part of this process. Specifically, we can notice that there are some opportunities for automating tasks such as validate documents provided, where we could use an RPA to perform that operation, and upload documents, where we could use intelligent document processing. If I look at these tasks, they are both performed by a documentation specialist. So the problem now is with this documentation specialist role that is getting overutilized, especially because we are able to process many more disputes within the same time frame, given that we have streamlined the case fulfillment stage of this process. I now go to the latest simulation model that we created, the what if scenario number 2, and I generate from this a third scenario where I will add the RPA and the IDP in the first part of the process. So use of RPA and IDP to support documentation specialist. So now we can take a closer look at the first part of the process, and I see that indeed I have an activity check guidelines that is in a loop back with validate documents provided. That's because when the validation has a negative outcome, then the guidelines need to be reviewed so that the documents can be validated once again. However, if this activity, instead of being performed by a documentation specialist, is now going to be performed by an RPA, we can remove the checking of the guidelines, since the validation is going to be done automatically and is going to be exempt from errors. In addition, this activity, upload documents, again, allocated currently to the documentation specialist, can be allocated to an IDP. And as such, we can actually bring this activity before the validation of the document so that we can first upload and then validate the documentation. So I'm going to make this structural change in this process. I'm going to put upload documents first, reconnect it to the gateway, and then that activity is going to be followed by validate documents provided. So now all I need to do as a last step is to go to my roles and add an RPA and an IDP. So the RPA will work 24/7, and I can assume I will start with one RPA instance. I also assume a cost of $2 per hour, and I assign the validate documents provided to the bot. I do the same thing for upload documents. I add the IDP, which in reality in Salesforce is also going to be implemented through an RPA. I set this IDP bot to be available 24/7, and I will start with one resource with a cost of $2 per hour, and I assign the upload documents task to the IDP. So now the last step is to change the allocation of resources for these two activities. They are no longer going to be performed by a documentation specialist, and they're not going to last 40 minutes for upload documents and 1.2 hours for validate documents, but a fraction of that time, given that now they are going to be, and they're not going to last 40 minutes and respectively 1.2 hours, but a fraction of that time, given that now they're going to be executed automatically by the bots. So I can set the duration to fixed, assume 2 minutes maximum per each activity, and as I did for upload documents, in validate documents provided, I can remove the documentation specialist so that I can leave this activity only to the RPA bot. So now I can trigger the simulation of the third what-if scenario and compare it with the previous one to see if effectively I've now managed to reduce the end-to-end duration of this dispute management process below 24 hours. Once again, as I simulate a scenario, Apromore generates an event log that captures that simulation. I can now compare the last scenario that I created with the assist and with the previous two what-if scenarios to see how I have managed to incrementally improve this process by applying different automation solutions, orchestration, agents, and finally RPA plus IDP. Let's ask Apromore to launch a dashboard to compare the scenarios. So in blue, I have the assist that, as you would recall, had an end-to-end duration of about 1.7 months. In red, I have the first what-if scenario where I orchestrated case fulfillment in Financial Services Cloud, obtaining the most dramatic cycle time reduction from 1.7 months down to 1.2 days. In green, I have the second what-if scenario where I added the agent, keeping the duration more or less the same, but that allowed me to reduce the FTEs of the case officer. And finally, to hit my KPI of completing the handling of a dispute within 24 hours, I applied the last change in the request intake by automating the uploading and the validation of the documentation. And I managed indeed to drop the duration down to 17.5 hours on average. I've also further reduced the cost and I can see, if I look at the resource utilization, that now the utilization of the specialist has dropped from 92% to 66%. So the documentation specialist is no longer a bottleneck for my process. Now I can generate a process automation assessment report that I can transfer alongside all the metadata collected for this automation solution to the MuleSoft RPA Manager, ready to be added to the pipeline of task automation ideas for implementation. So for that, I go to the overview section to generate a process automation assessment report. I can select as a report format the dedicated MuleSoft RPA Manager evaluation format. I sign on into my endpoint, and after I've done that, I have basically connected Apromore with my running instance of RPA Manager. So now I can introspect from RPA Manager the evaluation template. I have built a dedicated one for process mining and the category for this process evaluation idea. I can put it under disputes management. So the report gives me statistics at the level of the process, what was the assist average cycle time, and what is that to be in light of implementing the bot and the IDP. What was the average cost before and after, and what was the monthly frequency before and after. And I can generate dedicated statistics also for the tasks that I'm contemplating to automate. The report is going to generate the dedicated statistics and provide the details in years. And all this metadata is going to be transferred to MuleSoft's RPA Manager. I can also set qualifiers and benefits and then submit the report. Once I log in into MuleSoft RPA Manager, I'll be able to see that idea popping up in my digital pipeline of automation ideas. Here I can see my pipeline, and I can reorder by creation date, and I can apply a filter to select only the ideas that are relevant to my disputes management process. And I can see how the latest idea that I just uploaded ranks with respect to other ideas related to this process. If I explore that idea in detail, I will see all the metadata that I have transferred from Apromore. In conclusion, in this demo series, I've shown how we can use the combined power of Apromore's process mining, design and simulation capabilities to unlock and assess the impact of automation opportunities within an end-to-end business process, and how we can leverage the wealth of automation capabilities provided by the Salesforce ecosystem, ranging from orchestration through to Agentforce, RPA and IDP. And the same principle could also be applied to unlock system integration opportunities that can be realized through Anypoint API.